You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade. You will bring about the destruction of the German war machine. Your task will not be an easy one.
Hold up. Keep in touch. Drop. Stand by.
Your enemy is well trained, well equipped, and battle hardened.
Yeah, well. We have to get ahead. Cut the road. We are covered in infantry.
We will gain
Forward.
the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
This review was shot on the Origins table. It's a nice looking, sturdy board game table with cup holders and an arena for all your tabletop needs. No, but like seriously, doesn't that look good? With the inclusion of the topper, it fits so many games to throw at it. It also has a lifetime warranty. We'll have a dedicated video for it coming up, and you can use our link below if you're interested in grabbing one. World War II, Yankee Americans versus Germans. We'll just call them Germans for this video. Anyways, this is a really popular matchup that's super accessible with just this one box. In Undaunted Normandy, you'll take control of one of the rifle platoons in, well, Normandy 1944, controlling dudes around a board through playing cards. And then those cards are from a deck of cards you'll also be building. There's all sorts of different cards with their own abilities to be played in 12 scenarios. Oh, and then in case you're curious, we played through scenarios 1 through 6, meaning we've played through almost every mechanic in this box except for hills and radios. We used all the units you can to play on the board in every single card. And I got to be the Germans for this whole endeavor. Anyways, Undaunted Normandy is only a 2-player game that runs about 45 to 60 minutes, about that time, but let's just get into the how to play. The goal is to achieve your objective for that scenario, usually controlling a certain amount of objective points. You have your control markers on enough flags at the end of a turn, you win. You'll start deployed in a certain way, and have a certain starting deck of cards. Cards correspond to tokens on the board, so if you draw that card, you can use that piece. For every round, you'll first fight over initiative, so both players will discard a card from the starting hand of 4, and whoever has the higher value takes the initiative, meaning they get to go first. Current initiative holder breaks ties. When it's your turn, you just play cards from your hand of now 3, there's no cost. Every time you play one, you just do their listed options. Move someone, move them out on the card. But you can only move units to areas that have been scouted. So that's why you have scouts usually move first. Now this place can be moved into by other units. And that means you have to scout an objective's area before getting to move into it, and it's also another action to take control with the riflemen if the enemy is not there. You're also going to have useless cards through these fogs of war, which you get every time you scout a new area. To get more cards in your deck, you'll use the bolster action on cards. Just grab those cards from the supply, they're now part of your deck permanently. Shooting at each other is important in war, so if you attack, you grab a d10 and roll as many dice as your attack says. You're trying to hit equal to or higher the unit's defense, plus the distance you have to it, plus any defense modifiers they have where they're standing. This basically means that it's harder to hit people far away and that terrain matters. If your platoon is hit, you have to immediately discard a matching card from your hand if you have it. If not, then from your discard. If not there, then from your deck. If you really don't have the card at all, you have to delete that token from the board. If you ever lose all of your rifleman tokens, you're considered pinned down. You usually lose. At the end of your turn, you just discard any card you didn't use, probably the useless fog of war, and then you're ready for the next round. You just keep repeating these rounds of drawing 4 cards, discarding 1 to try to get initiative, and then playing the rest of the 3 cards as much as you can, using them to deck build or move stuff around the board. This is just the bare bones, of course, more rules in the pros. Undaunted Normandy is a very well put together box. Even the box has a nice thick linen-like feel that's hard to put into words, but it's nicer than most game boxes. Components are all solid quality and things fit well in the insert, meaning you literally don't need any plastic bags. Everything is concise, no weird unnecessary pieces. As for visuals, man, this game's card art has a nice gritty look. There's even different faces on each soldier. Yeah, that's right, there's a great attention to detail here. This leads into putting names on each card, which we'll get into later. Every card with their number is just immediately clear on what it is at a glance, and nothing is ever confusing on the board either, which has different art for different terrain. Oh, and the instructions are super solid. The rulebook is very concise with tons of visuals, a very fleshed out example round, and clear definitions. There wasn't any time we were confused while learning the game. The scenario booklet also never wastes time, with brief flavor text, hints to look out for, and even giving a nice tiles table to expedite setup. This table template of showing you what cards you should use and what cards you are not using should really be used in more games. Now on to gameplay pros, let's talk about how the card play makes a lot of sense for this World War II theme. Basically, every token on the board represents a squad of soldiers that can get activated through playing the corresponding card. If you, the commanding officer, don't have the card, they just sit there awaiting orders. Okay, you know what? I'm not a military historian, but we did some digging, okay? Infantry were sent out in the smaller groups of 12 on the Western Front. So the scope of everything in this game checks out. To put it in cinematic terms, the card play definitely represents Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers pretty darn well. Each card plays calls upon a notable man from a squad of soldiers to go ahead and do something and or tell the people in the squad to go ahead and do stuff. Oh, and real quick, the resemblances with these images are so cool to see. I want to watch Band of Brothers again. In war comes miscommunication and having the sequence of orders get jumbled. Yeah, I don't want you right now, I want my scout. Or, no, there's Fog of War as a literal card to slow down communication. That's some awesome theme meets gameplay. As your command gets foggier, the more you extend your communication lines. This randomness of war ends up feeling quite fitting for the very simple hands. The miscommunication is a great excuse to streamline each turn down to 3 cards. Okay, so now let's delve a little deeper into the pros of the actual card play, where Undaunted Normandy does a good job of making you question, do you want to play this card to help your board right now, or do you want to use it to help your deck? Back to Fog of War useless cards, it's a cool decision of how much and when you take this hit, because you'll definitely want to scout ahead to get to those objectives, but doing so will bloat your deck. Maybe you scout ahead slowly, using Scout's recon action to remove the Fogs of War you put in your deck, or you can favor a clumsier deck and scout super fast to have better positioning. And in general, anytime you activate a unit, namely advance them on a battlefield, you'll have to keep track of how often you're actually going to be moving and activating that unit once you push it up. Do you have more rifleman cards to reposition this guy? Or is he going to get shot down before he can move? You can buy more of this type before you decide to move them out. But wait, buying cards is this guy's entire usage, instead of using him to inspire, which is activating a card again, meaning you could have moved or attacked with something on the board. There's more map versus deck trade-off cards. Scouts give and remove Fog of War as aforementioned, but they can also give your opponent Fog of War. Or how about getting to draw 2 cards for more options, or getting to deck build any 3 cards you want in that scenario? Even attacking enemies has you thoughtful of how many copies of cards your opponent has, since you are thinning their deck by killing off cards. Shooting this gunner platoon seems like a great idea since that has been causing you trouble. But then if those gunner cards get removed, your opponent is more likely to draw their riflemen, which they need to secure the objective, technically speeding up their deck if they want to rush the objective. The next pro is the initiative system, where you fight for control of who goes first every round. This is checking off a lot of good boxes, from simplicity versus decision space versus how it handles randomness. Why is this checking off so many good boxes? Well, you're going through your deck faster in drawing 4 cards every round, which is always good to see more cards being circulated, but then you're discarding one of them every turn, so your turns aren't too complex. You only have 3 cards left. And you can't just discard whatever. Whatever you discard influences whether you go first or second, which is a really cool decision to make. Do you discard something strong to get first player advantage, or something useless to concede initiative and have a more fleshed out turn? Nice that Fog of War can be fodder like that. And conversely, that 9 card may be worth discarding if you want to go first. But wait, what if they are discarding a 9 as well? This is where the macro play of holding onto the initiative works, because prior holders of it break ties. So sometimes you want to hold onto it when you currently don't need it. You don't auto discard Fog of War necessarily. So again, maybe you do discard that 9 to go first, but you are losing the best card in the game? And I mean, going first is super good, because shooting first is pretty good if you know anything about guns. Oh, and then this whole initiative thing ties well into the deck building too, because normally, the stronger the unit is on the board, the battlefield, the lower its initiative value is. Now for the units, these are awesome. So there's 5 of them, and each of them feel very unique in their own way, and they're slowly unlocked throughout this campaign, so you don't get overwhelmed with all of them at once. Your core unit, the riflemen, is very basic. They don't really do anything that great with the weakest defense and attack in the game, but they are the only thing that can control objectives, and if they all die, you usually lose the game, so you must use them carefully. Next is a scout, which move fast and do all the Fog of War manipulation. They must be used in tandem with riflemen to scout the path forward. They are also the best buyable initiative value card at 6. The next ones are a little more saucy. There's the machine gunner, which has ridiculous firepower through suppressing fire, where you roll every single die in the game. And if you hit, you don't do damage, but basically stun that unit for a turn, which can be really crucial in slowing down your opponent. Their attack is also pretty darn good, 2 dice. But remember, they can't take objectives. Then the sniper starts twisting the game a little bit since he does his own thing and moving to places not even scouted yet. And when he attacks, he rolls 3 dice to kill. He also has the best defense in the game. Finally is Mortar, which doesn't get penalized by range, and when it hits, you roll for everything in that square, including your own units if they're there. Drawback to them is that they have to first target the square they're attacking before letting off the mortars. But heck, being able to mortar your clumping opponent's army is super useful. For each scenario, it's up to you on how many cards of each of these 5 units you want to purchase from the scenario supply. It's not always going to have everything accessible, but each unit has A, B, and sometimes even a C side to debate between buying. Like, do you really like suppressing fire, so you load up on machine gunners? Or maybe for this, you should just rush the objective ASAP, so you load up on a bunch of riflemen. Oh, but which one? A or B? Frustrated about Fog of War? Get more scouts to recon and delete them. Finally, shout out to the 3 remaining cards that aren't units, but are these higher up soldiers who are on the board. But they're equally as dynamic to use. Again, anytime you have the choice to deck build versus doing other stuff is cool, and these cards' high numbers always let them be an option to play for initiative. Then this platoon guide, which is a later unlock, is the most interesting, since he lets you straight up move another counter on the board a space for mad flexibility. We gotta talk about the 12 scenarios too. They definitely all feel different, at least the 6 that we've played. While the goals usually fall under control X amount of objective points, the way the objectives are set up on the board mean vastly different things. 5 of the first 6 scenarios introduce 1 new unit, slowly unraveling the complexity that makes the deck building strategies super manageable for when the possibilities later begin to blow up with you accessing every card. When the options get big and you don't start with certain units on the board, do you want to bother with deck building those? Is adding to my scouts worth it when I don't even need to explore right now and I can get more snipers and Mordor for firepower? You gotta think about the deck size too. Given that I have to target with mortars before firing, I would probably want to be drawing them fairly often in my deck. But I can only get up to 3 mortars. Is that going to be drawn enough? Let's go back to the objectives, where sometimes you're looking to venture real far out to capture something while being pincered. Or other times you may want to just stand your ground and wait for your opponent to come to you. Sometimes literally all you need is 1 big objective to win, and so you can high risk, high reward rush it. To wrap it up, there's nice immersion through the concise terrain, where certain places like forest or hills give more armor, which really sells that thematic visual of just ducking into a French forest to evade machine gun fire. We haven't really talked about asymmetry yet because everyone has the same cards, but the decks and initial placements typically feel set up in a way fairly appropriate to the asymmetry of World War II, but again, we're not military historians, okay? Like in our first 6 scenarios, we noticed that the Germans sometimes tend to be closer to better objectives or start on them because they're defending in the war, but are outnumbered or flanked in some way. Meanwhile, the Yankees have to spread themselves a little more thin and will probably lose more guys throughout the game. Because there's all these deck building possibilities with 12 different scenarios where you can play either side, it's safe to say Undaunted Normandy's replayability is amazing. And we found ourselves wanting to run back the same scenario with the same armies because we figured out some way to deck build or rush objectives better. The last pro is that Undaunted Normandy, for its fairly small size and time length, does a really good job of giving this World War II story in a single hour. There's a ton of historical tidbits throughout the game, where there's this entire page in the rulebook explaining how platoon structures work, and then there's also flavor text in each of the scenarios. It's never too wordy or in your face if you want to ignore it too, but if you buy into it, here's a couple of cool stories that we found. German machine gun nests camp in the woodlands of Montmartin and Gragen as trying to mow down as many Americans as possible, while those Americans just need to get 1 objective. They sprint to the 2 defense farmlands as fast as they can. Some riflemen platoons might not make it. Okay, enough with that voice, but let's start using the names on cards to help. A lone American sniper, Jack Morris, sits in a small house, trying to buy time for the Americans to take the central bridge before the Germans grab their objective of the hill he's near. Jack is the only one there. Can he survive heavy machine gun fire trying to suppress him while scouts and riflemen sprint towards him? In our timeline, he landed 4 confirmed kills, but still could not slow down the Germans enough. The American command played a little too slow on their approach to the bridge. Let's end with these German snipers. I could say this Gustav Becker is holding the sniper rifle, while Erwin Kruger is spotting for him. When Gustav Becker is shot by the advancing Americans, Erwin grabs that sniper rifle and keeps firing for the fatherland. Why focus on these names so much? Well, after the scenario ends, you can name a heroic contribution, or MVP, of whoever you thought contributed the most, which is a cool way to honor the individual efforts of World War II soldiers. Check out this little spreadsheet we made for one of our playgroups. Oh, and then if you complete the campaign, they even have this table to explain what might have happened if one side had more wins than the other. Cool for those who like to ponder alternate history. Cons. Where are the player aids? Every one of the card abilities is jargon at first. Control, suppress, scout, recon, etc. This won't make any sense when you're first starting, requiring a player aid. This does have a fantastic reference sheet though on the second to last page of the rulebook. We wish this would have been on the back of the rulebook so you can easily access it, or provide player aid sheets for each player. Now for gameplay cons, let's start with Undaunted Normandy having a bit of a weird handling with dice rolling. Every time you attack someone, you roll a d10, and a 10 will always hit, regardless of where you fire from. So you can literally attack someone from across the map and kill them. This not only feels unthematic if you're using a rifleman to attack a sniper who's hiding in a bunch of trees or in a hilltop, like super far away, but also getting an insane roll like this is weirdly swingy because of the way dying works. So let's get into how soldiers dying is a little swingy too. When that happens, you delete the matching card from the opponent's hand if it's there. Well, if you go first, meaning you fire first, you can start landing great card advantage as you are doing this double whammy of losing them an action from their hand and also deleting good cards from their deck. It's very possible to just neutralize someone's hand, which means they skip their turn. That's a really ouchy feeling. And then when you're rolling, the combat mechanism is just straight up rolling d10s with some basic modifiers, and sometimes you have to keep rolling until you land hits, leading to a feeling of repetitive dice rolling if you keep getting weird misses. Sometimes in simpler scenarios where there's less to manage and only simple units, you're chucking d10s in back-to-back turns. This also has the problem of making the game run longer than an hour sometimes, even in the simpler scenarios, just because you don't get the rolls you want sometimes, especially if you need to kill a bad guy who's sitting on the area you need to control to win. Basically, Undaunted Normandy is a game where outcomes can feel pretty victim to d10 rolls, but again, this does vary scenario to scenario. Can't call this a huge deal due to how this game is lighter anyways, but it does leave us questioning if there could have been a time limit on scenarios to instill a sense of urgency, or maybe some friendly re-rolling mechanic to even out the variance there, or limiting range on attack so you don't have cross-court deaths happen from 10s roll. That just feels weird for everyone involved. A simple house rule you can implement is when you lose a unit, that gets deleted from your hand last in priority. So first you would delete from discard, then your deck, then your hand. If you have it in your hand but don't delete it yet, you still reveal it so the attacker has knowledge that it's in your hand. That could matter sometimes. Nitpicks. Unit nitpick, the sniper. He is a bit weird because he rolls 3 dice, but then this game has a bit of a precedent where rolling more dice is more shots fired. The machine gunner rolls 4 dice when you have massive suppressing fire, and you learn about the machine gun first, which makes the sniper feel thematically weird to roll a bunch of dice. The sniper definitely could have had you just roll 1 die but hit on a high accuracy, like a real sniper, or give you some type of reroll there. The sniper also feels slightly overtuned with its defense of 6, since he already has the best attack in the game with rolling 3 dice to kill and can move without scouts. The best way to take out a sniper is to get a sniper of your own, so maybe this is intentional and thematic, but in some scenarios, both sides don't have access to snipers. This guy's defense just feels an integer too high. There are also some slightly confusing rules hiccups that we found starting in scenario 4. Interacting with suppressed units can get confusing at times, and the included box in the rulebook isn't quite in-depth enough to explain it. Also, if you use the platoon guide to guide other pieces, does that mean they do their special move, like a scout scouting? These are all answered cleanly on BGG, but we're a little annoyed how there wasn't an FAQ or clarification within the rules. To make it slightly worse, you get slowed down on looking up specific cards, because the area in which they're defined mixes flavor text with gameplay mechanics. It's giving you strategy with historical relevance, just separate the two. Scoring! Now it's time for the recommender score, where we try to critically weigh the aforementioned pros and cons of this game, with the caveat of whether or not this is even a good idea in the first place. And so, Undaunted Normandy is going to get a 9 out of 10. It is excellent. It's a lot of World War II feelings where the card play and positioning meet each other very well. There's not a lot of rules, things are generally explained cleanly, and then you're mostly just touching cards in terms of components. You can choose which scenario fits your playgroup's preferences for complexity, and even if you just play the first couple scenarios, there's enough thematic goodness to feel like you're saving Ryan's privates in World War II. But before you just go and chuck money to buy this game, remember, Undaunted Normandy is a very simple game in the context of being a World War II game. And so the simplicity can sometimes be working against it. Like, the streamlining system of just tying pieces to cards can be of a bit of a double-edged sword when you don't get the cards you need. You can only use stuff you draw. Or we can see how putting down a single card for a group of soldiers is too much abstraction for some. At the end of a match, which Rifleman B really is my MVP here? But if your group is the type to easily spin fun character backstories or even inject a bit of role-playing, you won't have an issue crowning an MVP or having to deal with some shoddy hands. And the back of the rulebook literally says this isn't a simulator per se, rather it's trying to emulate the experience of being in command of such platoons. And so the questions of should you rush forward to grab the objective or wait for supporting fire, or to get more cards in bolstering your forces, or sabotaging their command deck, these are all real questions to ask during gameplay with some necessary abstractions for what Undaunted is. This isn't for those who must win in a war game after min-maxing. After all, we didn't really look into the balance too much of the scenarios. I mean, they seem fine enough given all of the randomness in the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if some sides are revealed to be way more likely to win certain scenarios, but that can be thematic too. Oh, and then if you hate dice rolling, stay away from this game. We also do have another warning that we couldn't find a place to put anywhere else in the review. You're actually pretty disincentivized in taking control points that are currently controlled by your opponents. Since getting closer to your opponents increases the likelihood that they'll hit you, and moving with the rifleman is the same action cost as attacking, you're usually best off finding another empty area than running into gunfire. Is this intentional? Possibly, just don't expect units to be fighting in the same space often or at all. But anyways, Undaunted Normandy is hitting a lot of sweet spots for a relatively quick 2-player game to just whip out. It's so easy to learn with no nonsense components that you can buy it and pretty much start the World War II feelings right away. It has a campaign, but doesn't demand a lot from the players from components and rules. It's abstracted to be simple, but certainly has theme if you buy into that. It's deck building with still a lot of focus on the actual battlefield. This is going to be a fantastic couples game or to just grab a buddy and play anywhere. I mean, we played most of our games at the park. There is also a solo variant that exists on BGG, but we haven't tried it because, well, it's not official. My personal score for Undaunted Normandy is going to be a 7 out of 10. I have a good time with it. I'm a huge fan of World War II stuff. Probably one of my most researched things on YouTube is World War II. So naturally, anything looking like this is going to be a likely hit, and yep, the theme checks out while playing. I actually feel like a platoon commander, managing my riflemen carefully across Normandy. And then I like deck building too. Freaking sick! When I was first playing, I could really feel the story moments of each rifleman or scout moving across the farmlands, or the machine gunners just holding down the trigger and keep blasting away. The mind games for the initiative competition at the start of each round is fun, and is one of the best feelings ever to have initiative, ditch a strong card, then see your opponent also ditch that strong card, and you win the tie because you had initiative, and you get to shoot first. Wahahaha. Though this novelty is starting to wear off for me, and I lowered it from a 9 to an 8, and then from an 8 to a 7 out of 10 after our 4th playthrough. I almost raised this back up to an 8 out of 10 after playing Scenario 5, which was really fun and giving a ton of options to deck build anything I wanted to, but gun to my head, I'm leaning towards 7 out of 10. The main reason for this is what we covered in the cons. There's just too much variance in dice rolling for my tastes. And I especially don't like how combat feels so feast or famine. If you land a hit, super awesome, you're now up an entire card. If they discarded one from your hand, you're very far ahead. It almost feels disgusting in how far you are ahead. This gets compounded onto games where, I kid you not, I have missed every single die roll, and meanwhile I'm getting shot left and right. And all those zeros everywhere, I'm haunted by them. To go off of that, Undaunted started to feel a teensy repetitive in how simple the units are, leading to some turns feeling a little anticlimactic. There's not that many systems to think of if you draw poopy, and then sometimes you have vanilla turns of just moving units forward. This isn't the fault of Undaunted Normandy, it's just my preferences where I feel like it's missing a little something there, some extra management or a mechanic, so I feel like I'm getting more out of it after 4 hours or so of gameplay. And then it also is realistic-esque World War II, so not every single card should have fancy flashy abilities, so yeah, my expectations for cards have been ruined a bit by trading card games. My last little gripe is that I've had way too many games run past 1.5 hours, and not in a good way, as it feels like the game can sometimes drag on through missed dice rolls. But anyways, yeah, I'm super glad I got to play this. It doesn't really have a space in my current rotation of gaming, but I'm 100% going to keep holding on to this because this hits a really sweet spot for anything World War II, and I can just teach it to anyone, so yeah, I'm hoping I get to play those crazy scenarios one day. Thanks for watching the video. That was Undaunted Normandy. I was thinking about trying Undaunted Stalingrad, but just too busy. There's too many other games to cover. Anyways, thank you to all our patrons right here for making videos like this possible. Thank you guys so much. This one took a little longer than I thought because I wanted to play through all the scenarios to unlock all the units. So we got through about halfway through the game. And then we also got our Mad Lads of Cardboard right here. Anyways, yeah, let me know what you think of this game. I highly recommend it. As we said, yeah, comment, subscribe. Bye-bye.